Yeah, Sheikh Mullah Krekar is a phenomenal figure. He's one of the very few pure voices of Islam in Europe. And he stands very firm on the fact that Muslim land needs to be liberated and the Sharia needs to be implemented. But he's also very clear that he believes that Muslims live under a covenant of security, that they're not allowed to target, for example, the Norwegian people. Therefore, he does not have a problem, in fact, with the Norwegian people per se. He has a problem with the government and the courts and the special police who are now orchestrating this campaign against him.
But it's a Norwegian court that has judged him to a prison sentence.
That's correct, and he believes this is a political decision made by the Norwegian government to please, for example, the American establishment and those people who are fighting a war against Islam and Muslims, which became apparent, obviously, recently with their own training schedule. And what he's basically saying is that, this is something which is a phenomenon which is completely out of step with his relationship with the Norwegian people, because he's been there since 1991. He's never threatened the Norwegian people. He's proclaimed the Islamic verdict for many things, but he's never said, in fact, that somebody should implement, for example, the penal code here in Norway. So, this has been taken completely out of context, his current statements.
And now you are calling for people to try to free him. How?
Yes, I believe that all Muslims, wherever they may be, need to talk about Mullah Krekar, but in particular, Muslims in Norway need to make awareness about his case. They need to say that there could be severe repercussions if he is humiliated or if he is tortured or even killed in Iraq. The situation for the Norwegian people will be very precarious.
But he has not been sent to Iraq, he has been sent to Norwegian prison.
Yes, but nevertheless, at the moment, obviously, he is being incarcerated. This is against his own rights as a human being. There should be no reason he's not been found guilty of any crimes. And, there's a threat over his head that he could possibly be sent to a country where he could be tortured and murdered. So this is a very grave situation for him, and the Muslims see him as one of their own.
So what do you want Muslims to do to get him freed?
Well, we should do everything we can. We should be making protests and demonstrations. We should highlight his own plight. We should make awareness that he's not committed any crime. We should expose the Norwegian government and the courts for their duplicity and the hypocrisy, because he's been here saying the same thing for the last 2 decades.
But he has been judged for committing a crime, and that's why he is in prison. But on your website, you are going further. You are encouraging people to take hostages to exchange with Mullah Krekar to get him freed. Can you explain?
Yeah, what we are saying is that in Islam there are options that the Muslims have, either to ransom someone or to break him free from prison, for example, or indeed to exchange him for other hostages. Now, obviously, we live here under a covenant of security, so it's not allowed for me to do that. But Muslims, you see, in Muslim countries, they know that this is the Islamic ruling, and therefore you see many hostages, for example, already taken in Iraq, in Afghanistan and other places to exchange for others who are being held in the West.
But you are actually encouraging people to take UK or US citizens as hostages to be able to exchange them with Mullah Krekar. That's what you're writing on your website.
No, this is not correct, because I believe that we have a covenant of security in Britain, as indeed Mullah Krekar does in Norway. So we cannot do anything like that. But what I'm saying is that Muslims believe this around the world. So what I'm saying is that if you continue to take people hostage, for example in the West, this is the kind of repercussion that could occur, for example, in Muslim countries where you have Norwegians and British citizens.
But you must understand that this can be understood as an encouragement to take hostages, and that's illegal.
Why don't you take it as if you like, an explanation of the Islamic position? It's better that I explain to you that this is in fact the Islamic ruling, than for us to remain silent and tomorrow you face some hostages, who are going to be suffering because of the actions of your government.
But do you support this Islamic ruling?
I support, Islam, in its totality. I don't believe that.
You support taking hostages to get prisoners freed?
I believe that the Muslims here in the West, they live under a covenant of security, so it's not allowed for me to do that. But my Muslim brothers abroad, obviously they have different rulings. For them, you see, the Sharia applies in a different way. So
it's okay for Muslims living in one of these countries to take hostages to get Mullah Krekar freed?
Well, as far as the Sharia is concerned, they have this from the Quran and the Sunnah and the example of the Prophet. There are examples where this happened in the past, and that doesn't mean that they will be mistreated, or that doesn't mean that they will be killed. But rather non-Muslims who are being held in Muslim countries, they can be swapped or exchanged for the Muslims. This is a very decent relationship. Why can't we release the Muslims, and perhaps some Western hostages who are being held, for example, in Iraq and Afghanistan, can be returned?
But I need to understand this properly, because you are calling for Sharia law also in Europe, and now you are explaining that in Muslim countries it's allowed to take hostages to exchange them with Muslim prisoners in the West. Do I get it right? Do you support this?
Let me explain it in my own words. What I'm saying to you is that as far as hostages who are being held by non-Muslims are concerned. The Muslims in the Muslim world have one of three options as far as the Sharia is concerned. And this is not my own opinion, this is what is mentioned in the Quran.
You support Sharia?
Well, of course I support the Sharia. I have no choice because I'm a Muslim. They can ransom them. For example, they can pay money and they can release them. Or they can free them from captivity. Or they can exchange them for non-Muslims. So these are the three choices that they have.
But Mullah Krekar is judged in a Norwegian court system in the country he has chosen to stay in, to live in. Mustn't he and you all respect the rules of that country?
Well, you know, if you live in the jungle, then you don't abide by the laws of the jungle.
Don't you?
We believe that there is a superior law, which is the Sharia in Islam. You know, if people are acting in a barbaric way, which they are, as you know, in Guantanamo Bay, in Bagram, and even in the Britain and the Norwegian courts, people are being held without any charge for years. And then after that, they say, well, sorry, you know, we don't have any evidence. Mullah Krekar has done nothing wrong. He's merely explained the Islamic verdict. He's not saying that other people need to implement it in Norway.
But Norwegian court says he's done something wrong. They've judged him for a prison sentence.
The Norwegian courts are wrong. And this is a political decision. It's been made to please their own masters, the Americans and the others who are engaged in the war on terror. He's been saying the same thing for the last 2 decades. How comes he's not been in prison? He has no bad relationship with the Norwegian people.
But what kind of system do we have if people like you can just say that the Norwegian court system is wrong, and you can decide that other people can take hostages to get him freed? What kind of a system is that?
Those are your words. What I say to you is that Muslims abroad, they need to do everything they can to release Muslims from prison. And we don't mistreat prisoners, we don't mistreat hostages. We will exchange, inshallah, you know, the non-Muslims who are being held in Muslim countries for the Muslims being held by you. But I think instead of getting into this situation in the first place, why don't we deal with the oppression and the injustice which is being faced by the people, for example, in the Western countries? And why can't we change the situation? Why can't the Norwegian people say, actually, we have no problem with Mullah Krekar? Why can't he live with his family? He said he won't access the internet. He said he won't be on the phone. So what threat is he to the Norwegian people?
But what is the problem of sending him to Iraq, sending Abu Qatada to Jordan, if those are the societies you treasure so much?
No, you're absolutely wrong. The regimes in Iraq and the regimes in Jordan are backed up and funded by Western regimes like Norway. We are as much against those regimes as we are against the Norwegian regime. We want to remove them and we want to replace them with the Sharia. Put them in the hand of the Muslims who are practicing. For example, in Afghanistan or in Somalia or in Iraq, people who call for the Sharia, they would be quite happy to take in Mullah Krekar, or even in places like Tunisia and in Egypt, now that we've removed some of those regimes.
But why don't you move there if they have the best society in the world, as you see it?
Why can't I change Britain and Norway to become even better than they are? I was born in this country. I probably lived here longer than you have. I think that I have a right to call them to something better. We can call them for the Sharia. We can get rid of these people who are making the law up as they go along, and we can replace this, inshallah. One day the flag of Islam will fly high over this building.
You also mentioned the Norwegian government. What is your view upon the Norwegian government?
Well, I think the Norwegian government has involved itself in a war really where they have no interest, which is the war in Afghanistan. They have troops there, and they support the American agenda. The American agenda is an agenda for establishing their military and economic interests in Muslim countries, and they don't care how much blood they spill. This is not in the interest of the Norwegian regime. If they withdraw, we can have a decent relationship. But as long as you're in the battlefield, then you're going to put yourself in the same position as America and their own allies, and the Muslims will treat you as an enemy.
So what do you encourage Muslims around the world to do in terms of the Norwegian government?
Well, I think the Muslims must make awareness about the plight of Muslims and the situation of the foreign policy, for example, in particular of the Norwegian regime. But I would add to that the Norwegian people as well, they must account their own government, and they must say, look, this is not in our name. And if need be, remove their own government and say, look, you're causing problems for us. And of course, the Norwegian regime, they need to understand it is not in their interest to treat Mullah Krekar the way that they are and to be involved in Muslim soil, which quite frankly, you know, they have no business being in Muslim land.
But what should people that support you do to change the government of Norway?
Well, you know, in the West, we believe in an ideological and political struggle. So we will make awareness about the plight of Muslims and do everything, you know, within the law.
But you also talk about physical actions.
Yeah, but this is something which in Muslim countries, you see, where they have, no covenant with the regimes in those countries, and where there are non-Muslims already being held, for example, in Iraq and Afghanistan, they can swap those people with the Muslims, you see. What I'm saying is that I'm not saying, you know, go and take some people, for example, in Norway and in Britain. What I'm saying is there are already hostages being held in Muslim countries. They can exchange them with the non-Muslims Sorry, they can exchange the Muslims with the non-Muslims. This will be a very decent type of relationship. And I think that if you withdraw your forces and you stop supporting, for example, Israel as well, we can go back to a normal situation. It wasn't always the case that we had 9/11 and 7/7 and 3/11. Things have changed a lot, and I think it's about time we started reversing this quagmire of violence and attacking against each other.
But don't you think that statements like the one you're coming with today can encourage people to do violent things, terrorist actions?
Well, I would say to you that these things are taking place anyway. And, it's better for me...
Yeah, but this can contribute to more of that.
No, I don't think so, because my own position is one of informing you that this is what Muslims already believe. Now,
but you also have supporters who listens to you and who might take action because of what you're saying.
Let me tell you something. Look, my voice is here in order to calm the situation down. Now, you would face repercussions of what your government is doing in any case. And that may come as a surprise for many Norwegian people.
But it sounds like a threat to me.
I think, well, it could sound like a threat to you. For me, it's merely explaining the situation. It's better for me to say to you, look, this is what you could possibly face in Muslim countries, and this is what they may do to Norwegians who are abroad because of the actions of your government. I think the government are playing with fire. Now, if I can warn you, if we can improve the situation, if we can have a better relationship, surely that's better than to remain silent and just allow people to do as they wish and then suffer the consequences.
If I was a Norwegian soldier in Afghanistan, should I be afraid of my life?
Well, of course you should. What are you doing in Afghanistan? Afghanistan is not Oslo. It's not a place where they have a Norwegian authority. This is Muslim land, Muslim soil. The Muslims don't want the foreign forces on their own soil. So obviously they'll do everything they can to rid them, from their own place. So I think you need to appreciate that you are occupiers at the current time.
But you're not talking for all Muslims, obviously, because all Muslims don't feel like that.
Let me tell you something. Look, I'm not talking on behalf of any Muslim in particular or any Muslim group. I'm merely explaining to you what the Sharia says about the situation. And this is what Mullah Krekar himself said, that there could be repercussions for what happens to him abroad. And you should take it on face value. It's not a threat. We're not saying to you that we're going to carry something out. We're not encouraging other people to do anything. We're just saying, look, this is not in your interest, what is happening at the current time.
Are there groups of people in Britain or other places who are fighting Mullah Krekar's cause as you see it now?
Yes, of course, there are many people. There are many people who are from the Kurdish community in this country. They regard Mullah Krekar as one of their main scholars. In fact, within their community, there are many people in Europe as well as, in Norway, and of course many people abroad who have sent many messages of support. And even you can see from the Muslims around the world, even in Somalia and other places, they send messages of support. His situation is very similar to Sheikh Abu Qatada. And what we find is, in fact, that in order to silence Islam, what the governments are doing in Europe is taking out the main scholars and the intellectuals, and they think that Islam will be silenced. But sadly for them, there are many people like myself and others who will come forward, and we will continue to pass the message.
But what do you think these supporters of Mullah Krekar might do?
Well, this is something which is completely unpredictable. But what I would say to you is that as long as you oppress people like Sheikh Mullah Krekar, then I think the Norwegians need to be careful when they go to places like, for example, Kurdistan, for example, and Iraq. Then obviously people have in their mind already, this is what the Norwegians are doing with our own Sheikh. So I don't think they're going to be very happy with the Norwegians over there.
Is this a threat?
This is an understanding of the reality of the situation, I think.